Mr. Speaker.
I call Kevin Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's probably true that all parties in the House will be supporting this bill today. Certainly, that's what I hope to be the case. But I do want to, in this first reading contribution, express some concerns about process. I well remember the debates in this House on the 2012 Sale and Supply bill, and in particular I wanted to recall the testy mood of some of those debates and what happens when a complex piece of legislation is going through the House with a government that is not very interested in actually talking with some of the experts in the community and across party lines with some of the opposition parties. And as a result of that, Mr. Speaker, the government in various forms has had to come back to this House now on a number of occasions with fix-it-up legislation. And Mr. Speaker, that is a situation that could have been avoided. So the question that springs to mind and should spring to mind for the public is, while this is indeed a weakness of the legislation that Paul Foster-Bell's bill is dealing with, why wasn't this dealt with in 2012 or any of the intervening 4 years? So that's the first concern, Mr. Speaker, about process. It's a downside of rushed legislation or legislation that occurs with inadequate consultation across the House. I guess the second point I want to raise is when this shortcoming of the bill, or the Act as it was by that stage, came to light, why didn't the government step in to remedy that shortcoming? Why was it instead made a question for a member's bill? This is a classic situation, surely, for the government to introduce its own bill, because the government gets to control the process of a bill through the House. It's the government that's in the position to determine the place of legislation on the order paper and how quickly it can move it through all of its stages in the House. So, Mr. Speaker, it would have been appropriate for a government bill to remedy this problem. But instead, what we see is the way that the government has used Members' Day and the Members' Ballot. It has tended to use that members' ballot in a way that enables government members to put in bills that ought to be government bills, that are largely non-controversial pieces of legislation that are intended simply to reduce the odds of an opposition member's bill being drawn from that ballot. And Mr. Speaker, while I totally understand that that's within the rules of the House, it is not the spirit in which Members' Day should proceed. Myself, sir, I have two important bills. One that's about protecting endangered native species, another that's about overhauling New Zealand's antiquated and obsolete adoption law, and the chances that those bills have of being drawn are diluted by the government's choice of using Members' Day to advance effectively bills that it ought to be advancing itself. And then the third point, Mr. Speaker, is the truncated process that both speakers so far have referred to, and which on this occasion we are forced to agree to. Because if we don't agree to that truncated process, this bill can't take effect before Anzac Day this year. But both of the most recent examples of fix-up legislation to the Act have featured both of these characteristics: a member's bill when it should be a government bill, and a truncated or amended process when actually better planning could have seen a bill proceed in the proper way.